London, 1872. The air in the British Museum is thick with the scent of aging paper, beeswax polish, and the quiet dust of millennia. Outside, the city churns with the relentless progress of the Victorian age, the clatter of horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones, the distant shriek of a steam engine. But here, in a dimly lit chamber reserved for the arcane and the ancient, time itself seems to have stopped. Under the flickering, gentle hiss of a gas lamp, a man named George Smith leans so close to a fragment of baked clay that his breath mists its surface for a fleeting second. He is not a distinguished professor from Oxford or Cambridge. He is a former banknote engraver, a working-class man of prodigious intellect who taught himself to read one of the world's most difficult and dead languages, Akkadian cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script of ancient Assyria and Babylonia. The tablet before him is unassuming, one of tens of thousands of fragments excavated from the ruins of the Royal Library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, modern-day Iraq. It is broken, its edges jagged, its surface a cryptic puzzle of tiny impressions. For weeks, Smith has been meticulously piecing together these fragments, a grand jigsaw puzzle of a lost civilization. He is working on a text known as the Epic of Gilgamesh, a heroic poem about a Sumerian king's quest for immortality. But on this particular day, as his eyes scan a specific column of text on what would come to be known as Tablet 11, his practiced calm shatters. The flow of his translation stammers. His heart begins to pound against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the hallowed silence of the museum. He reads the lines again, his mind racing to process the implications. He sees a divine command to build a great ship. He reads of an impending deluge, a flood sent by angered gods to destroy humankind. He sees instructions to take animals, family, and craftsmen aboard. He reads of the ship coming to rest on a mountain and of a survivor sending out birds to search for dry land. It is, in every essential detail, the story of Noah's Ark. But this tablet was inscribed in Mesopotamia over 1,000 years before the earliest estimated composition of the biblical book of Genesis. In that moment, George Smith is said to have leaped to his feet in a state of great excitement, astonishing his colleagues by reportedly beginning to undress in a fit of ecstatic discovery. The story may be apocryphal, but the sentiment is entirely real. He had found something impossible, something that struck at the very heart of Western religious identity. To understand the seismic shock of this discovery, we must transport ourselves back to the intellectual battleground of Victorian Britain. Charles Darwin's Origin of Species, published just 13 years prior, had already opened a chasm between emerging scientific theory and traditional religious doctrine. The debate over evolution was fierce, pitting new evidence against centuries of faith. In this charged atmosphere, the Bible was, for a vast majority of the population, more than a sacred text. It was the ultimate source of history, a divinely authored, inerrant record of the world from its first day. The story of Noah and the Great Flood was not an allegory. It was an established historical event, a cornerstone of humanity's timeline. The uniqueness of the Hebrew Scriptures was considered a testament to their divine origin, a direct revelation from God to his chosen people, untainted by the pagan myths of their neighbors. And now, here was George Smith, a humble, self-made scholar, holding a piece of heathen clay that told the same story. This wasn't a vague reference to a flood. It was a detailed, structured narrative that predated its biblical counterpart by a millennium. The implications were staggering and deeply unsettling. If the flood story existed in a polytheistic, pagan culture long before Moses, what did that say about the Bible's claim to be a unique revelation? Was one of the most foundational stories of the Judeo-Christian tradition not divinely inspired, but simply borrowed? Had it been stolen from the Babylonians? The discovery threatened to reframe the Bible not as a singular miracle, but as one voice in a chorus of ancient Near Eastern mythologies. For a society grappling with its own crisis of faith, Smith's tablet was not merely an archaeological curiosity, it was a philosophical bomb. It forced a question that still echoes today. How could such a story exist centuries before the Hebrew Scriptures? And what did it imply about the very origins of faith's most foundational tales? Building on George Smith's groundbreaking discovery, we must now do what he did in that dusty room. Dive into the textual evidence itself and confront the uncanny parallels that so astonished him. Let us imagine for a moment that we are laying two ancient documents side by side. On one side, the weathered, baked clay of the Epic of Gilgamesh, its cuneiform script a testament to a forgotten empire. On the other, a fragile scroll of parchment, its elegant letters preserving the Genesis flood narrative. As we compare them, the echoes across the centuries become impossible to ignore. They are more than mere coincidences. They are a shared narrative skeleton, a blueprint that connects two vastly different cultures. The story begins with a divine warning. In Genesis, God sees the wickedness of humanity and informs his chosen righteous man, Noah, of his plan to destroy the world with a flood. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the divine assembly, led by the god Enlil, decides to wipe out humanity because their noise disturbs the god's sleep. However, the god of wisdom, Ea, feels this is unjust. Bound by an oath not to reveal the plan directly, he resorts to a clever trick, whispering the warning to the reed walls of a hut, where his favored human, Utnapishtim, can overhear it. In both cases, a single man is chosen to survive and preserve life. Next, the detailed instructions for the vessel. God tells Noah to build an ark of gopher wood, giving specific dimensions: 300 cubits long, 50 wide, and 30 high, with multiple decks and a single door. Ea tells Utnapishtim to tear down his house and build a boat, giving its dimensions as a perfect cube, 120 cubits on each side, with 7 decks. While the shapes differ, Noah's a rectangular vessel, Utnapishtim's a massive coracle or cube, more suited to Mesopotamian rivercraft, the core command is identical: build a massive boat to specific divine plans to save life. Then comes the boarding. God commands Noah, "You shall bring into the ark 2 of every kind of living thing, male and female." Utnapishtim is told to bring aboard the seed of all living things, along with his family, his wealth, and various craftsmen. The mission is the same: to create a floating repository of life, a genetic bottleneck to repopulate the world after its destruction. As the rains begin, both narratives describe the sealing of the door, a moment of finality that shuts the chosen family in and the doomed world out. The deluge is catastrophic, a cosmic undoing of creation. Genesis speaks of the fountains of the great deep bursting forth and the windows of heaven opening. Gilgamesh describes a storm so terrifying that even the gods themselves cowered like dogs and fled to the highest heaven, weeping at the destruction they had unleashed. Perhaps the most striking and undeniable parallel comes after the storm subsides. Both arcs come to rest on a mountaintop, Ararat in Genesis, Nasir in Gilgamesh. To test if the waters have receded, both heroes send out birds. This sequence is a near-perfect literary match. Noah first sends a raven, which flies to and fro. He then sends a dove, which returns. 7 days later, he sends the dove again, and it returns with an olive leaf, a sign of life. The third time, it does not return. Utnapishtim's sequence is slightly different, but serves the exact same purpose. He releases a dove, which returns, a swallow, which also returns, and finally a raven, which finds food, does not circle back, and signals that the land is dry. The use of birds as reconnaissance agents is a specific, peculiar detail that strongly suggests a shared origin. Finally, the aftermath. Upon leaving the ark, both Noah and Utnapishtim build an altar and offer a sacrifice to thank the divine for their salvation. The reaction is remarkably similar. In Genesis, God smells the pleasing odor and vows never again to curse the ground because of humanity. In Gilgamesh, the thirsty, starved gods gathered like flies over the sacrifice, and the goddess Ishtar lifts her necklace of lapis lazuli, swearing by it that she will never forget these days of destruction. Both stories conclude with a divine covenant or promise to prevent a future global flood, symbolized by a physical sign in the sky, the rainbow for Noah and the goddess's shining necklace for Utnapishtim. These deep structural parallels have led scholars to 2 primary theories. The first, as championed by Assyriologists like Stephanie Daly, is the theory of direct literary borrowing. During the Babylonian exile in the 6th century BCE, The Judean elite were forcibly relocated to Mesopotamia. There, they would have undoubtedly encountered the foundational literature of their captors, including the Epic of Gilgamesh. It is plausible, even likely, that Hebrew scribes, grappling with their own national catastrophe, adapted this powerful local myth, rewriting it to fit their monotheistic worldview and answer their own theological questions. The second theory, supported by scholars like William W. Hollow, suggests a common oral tradition. Perhaps both the Babylonian and Hebrew accounts are independent literary crystallizations of a much older shared flood memory that circulated throughout the ancient Near East for centuries, possibly inspired by the regular, catastrophic river floods of the Tigris and Euphrates. But regardless of the mechanism, a profound connection is undeniable. So, the question shifts from if they are connected to how and why. What does it mean for a sacred text to share such profound genetic material with its cultural neighbors? And how do believers reconcile these ancient echoes with their understanding of divine revelation?
From those striking textual parallels, we confront the most profound question: what do the differences tell us? If the Hebrew authors did borrow the blueprint of the flood story, they were not mere copyists. They were radical editors, theological revolutionaries who took a popular narrative and completely reframed its meaning to articulate a new and radical vision of the relationship between the divine, humanity, and the cosmos. The key to understanding the biblical account lies not in what it shares with its Mesopotamian predecessors, but in what it deliberately changes. Let's begin with the very reason for the flood. In the Mesopotamian epics, like Atrahasis, the motivation of the gods is almost comically petty. The supreme god Enlil decides to eradicate humanity because their noise is keeping him awake. It's cosmic pest control. The gods are capricious, irritable, and their devastating judgment is rooted in their own convenience, not in any moral framework. Genesis presents a stark, revolutionary contrast. The flood is not a result of divine annoyance, but a painful, deliberate response to human moral failure. The text states, "The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." The flood is a divine reset, a surgical removal of corruption to allow for a new beginning. This single change elevates the narrative from a myth about noisy mortals and touchy gods into a profound moral drama about justice, sin, and accountability. This leads to the second crucial distinction, the nature of the divine itself. The Mesopotamian pantheon is a dysfunctional family. They conspire, they lie, they panic. As mentioned, during the flood, they are depicted as cowering in fear. Afterward, they swarm Utnapishtim's sacrifice like flies, desperate and hungry. They are powerful, yes, but they are also flawed, limited, and morally ambiguous. The God of Genesis is utterly different. He is one, not many. He is sovereign and in complete control. His decision to bring the flood is presented not as an angry outburst, but as a sorrowful judgment. The text says, God regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. This is not the portrait of an irritated deity, but of a creator heartbroken by his creation. The subsequent covenant, symbolized by the rainbow, is not a fearful promise made in a moment of post-traumatic relief, but a foundational legal and theological statement about God's relationship with all of creation. The hero's character is also transformed. Utnapishtim is saved because he is a favorite of the god Ea, who helps him survive through a clever deception. His selection is based on favoritism. Noah, however, is chosen for a single powerful reason. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. His survival is a direct result of his moral character. He is not just lucky, he is worthy. This transforms the flood survivor from a passive beneficiary of divine whim into an active moral agent, a model for future humanity. Through these changes, the Hebrew authors took the raw material of a shared cultural myth and used it to argue for their unique worldview, that the universe is governed not by the chaotic whims of multiple gods, but by a single, just, and moral creator who is intimately concerned with human behavior.
Today, this understanding allows for a rich and nuanced reconciliation of faith and history. Many modern theologians and believers no longer see the Gilgamesh epic as a threat to the Bible's authority. Instead, they see it as evidence of God working through human culture, a concept sometimes called general revelation. In this view, the story of a great ancient flood was a powerful memory embedded in the collective consciousness of the Near East. The inspired authors of Genesis took this familiar story and imbued it with a new divine truth, much like a great artist might take a common folk song and arrange it into a sublime symphony. Interfaith dialogue now often embraces these connections, recognizing that different traditions used shared stories to explore humanity's deepest questions about suffering, survival, and our place in the universe. The discovery of the Gilgamesh tablet did not destroy the story of Noah. It liberated it from the realm of simple literal history and revealed its deeper theological artistry. The investigation that began with George Smith's shock in a London museum has led us not to a story of theft, but to a far more fascinating story of transformation, a testament to how ancient faith communities made sense of their world and articulated their vision of God, a process that continues to inspire and challenge us today.